You're seeing a drive by these very large, sophisticated money centers and the central banks to accumulate commodities like silver, like gold, to repatriate them, to do it in ways that really aren't being reported too much in the Western media. I think it's interesting. I look at it again as a very big contrarian indicator that the big sophisticated money is accumulating, and at the same time, the public here isn't. And again, we're seeing large deliveries off the Shanghai Gold Exchange and off the LBMA and off the COMEX. I guess we'll have to see. I think the trend of higher silver, just based upon the central bank interest in purchasing, one would think ultimately goes much higher, regardless of what short-term fundamentals look like.
The latest updates on silver prices in India indicate a fluctuating market trend. With global economic uncertainties and geopolitical tensions, the demand for silver as a safe haven asset has increased. In the past year, India has witnessed a significant rise in silver demand. This surge can be attributed to various factors such as industrial growth, investment opportunities, and jewelry making. With a career spanning over 2 decades in the financial services industry, AndySchectman has made a significant impact as the president and owner of Miles Franklin, Precious Metals. From a technical perspective, AndySchectman expresses optimism about silver's technical standing, emphasizing the importance of patience in the industry. He points out the continued global demand for silver, particularly in countries like India, where central banks accumulate the metal significantly. India's silver imports in the first 4 months of 2024 have surpassed the total for all of 2023, driven by rising solar panel demand and investor interest. The country imported a record 4,172 metric tons, up from 455 tons a year ago. This surge supports global prices and outperforms gold. Increased imports by the world's biggest silver consumer could support global prices, which are trading near their highest level in more than a decade. Based on his observation, Schectman sees the public's lack of involvement as a contrarian indicator, emphasizing central banks' accumulation as a sign of silver's potential. He predicts that silver's trend remains upward despite short-term fluctuations, driven by various macroeconomic factors. Bank of America remains bullish on silver prices, predicting an increase throughout the latter half of 2024 and into 2025. Now, we present the clips of AndySchectman's insights from his recent interview with Arcadia Economics. Before we continue to delve into this discussion, please subscribe to our channel and activate the bell icon for timely updates.
The $29 range, to me, is more or less support from the previous highs back in April. Pretty dang close to the 50-day moving average or so as well. Bill Holter and I were talking about this recently, and he penned a piece that he just sent out talking about this, where he thinks the next leg could go $34 to $37, and that it's been sitting for the last roughly 3 weeks in this 29 to 31 zone and not being overbought nor oversold and at any point. So it's getting to the point now where you're seeing the MACD, the moving average convergence divergence, I believe it's called, is starting to turn upwards and getting near crossing over, where at which point we could see it resume another rally up. But this is typical. This is where it's supposed to be, where it bounces off a support and the 50-day, and the fact that it came back up and is holding above 29 and closer to 30, I think is actually quite bullish from a technical standpoint. But I guess we'll have to see. But I think it's encouraging that it did indeed hold that support of 29. And I would hope that Bill's right and that we see it start to move up again in its next leg. But this is one of those deals where if you haven't learned patience yet in this industry, you never will. And it teaches you to try and find optimism wherever you can. Indeed, I think, look, the global demand for silver is not stopping. It's just hard to see it and notice it here in the United States, where the public really has not participated as much as one would think in the rally. In fact, you could argue that it is as off the radar screen now as it's been in the last 3-4 years to the public. At the same time, the central banks like India are massively accumulating it. And the common theme with all of the accumulation we see by these central banks is repatriation. Now, I know more of that is applicable in gold, where India bought 1.5 times the amount of gold they did all of last year in the first 4 months and brought it all home. At the same time, brought home 100 metric tons they've held at the Bank of England since 1991, I want to say. But I think the same thing is true with silver. It's just assumed. And when you look at all the silver that India has bought, well over 600 million ounces in the last couple of years, and now the increase in the amount of silver, I wrote this down, that the amount of silver that they've been buying from the United Arab Emirates is up 654 times in the past year, that they bought $2.2 million worth between January and April of 2023, yet over the same time period here in 2024, 1.44 billion, a 654-fold increase. So you're seeing a drive by these very large, sophisticated money centers and the central banks to accumulate commodities like silver, like gold, to repatriate them, to do it in ways that really aren't being reported too much in the Western media. I think it's interesting. I look at it again as a very big contrarian indicator that big sophisticated money is accumulating, and at the same time the public here isn't. And again, we're seeing large deliveries off the Shanghai Gold Exchange and off the LBMA and off the COMEX. So, I guess we'll have to see. But yeah, I think the trend of higher silver, just based upon the central bank interest in purchasing, one would think ultimately goes much higher, regardless of what short-term fundamentals look like, regardless of the pullback that we've seen. As far as I'm concerned, nothing's changed in a world that seems to be getting crazier by the day.
AndySchectman underscores the significance of Project mBridge, noting Saudi Arabia's full participation, which marks a major shift away from the dollar. This initiative eliminates the U.S.'s ability to impose sanctions and introduces a common settlement currency backed by 40% gold and 60% currencies from BRICS plus nations. mBridge will profoundly affect de-dollarization if digital yuan payments for oil become the norm. These payments will not dethrone, topple, or unseat the dollar, but will have a profound impact nonetheless. mBridge, the digital yuan, and the digital currencies of Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa do not need to topple the dollar to be disruptive. It is also important to note that the Chinese government, which holds $3.2 trillion in foreign currency reserves, has never stated that it sought to topple the dollar. Despite the current dominance of the US dollar, Schectman believes this development challenges its supremacy, revives gold's global value, and supports a shift toward a more transparent system with blockchain and commodities. Let's get back to the interview.
It's a big deal. And if you realize the Project mBridge it will be the vehicle that the unit trades on, to see Saudi Arabia, the largest oil producer in the world, sign on as a full participant is a very big deal. Project mBridge does not utilize dollars. Dollars do not work on Project mBridge. And so what it does is it eliminates the ability, first and foremost, for the United States and the West to impose sanctions, number one. And if you read the unit information, they talk about it being redeemable in gold for these countries. It is backed by something substantial. And when you realize that gold has outperformed the Treasury, the 10-year Treasury over the last 25 years by almost double with no counterparty liability, it incentivizes countries. Part of the petrodollar deal was to sell not only in dollars, but to take any of the excess reserves and put them into U.S. Treasuries, which has been the key to bolstering the bond market, keeping interest rates low and supporting our dollar and our system. If you all of a sudden have countries that not only aren't using the dollar to settle in, because the whole concept of the unit and the mBridge is that these countries can remain autonomous, have their own monetary policy, and trade in their local currencies, but settle in a common settlement currency that is backed by 40% gold and 60% in the currencies that are in the BRICS plus countries. So it incentivizes the stockpiling of gold, which we've seen. The BIS is part of the Project mBridge. They're the ones who reclassified gold. All of these things seem to be coming together. What it really does is, for the first time in 50 years, gives a real competitor to the system and reason to not stockpile treasuries and reason to not stockpile dollars. In other words, the settlement or the transaction would be done in local currencies. The settlement is done in a common settlement currency. Both chip away at the hegemony of the dollar. I think it remonetizes gold throughout the world in terms of its value and puts a question mark on the treasury. So yeah, it is ultimately something that would have a negative impact, one would think, ultimately, on the dollar. But again, when you see Saudi Arabia become a full participant in this program, I think it signals that the end of a system that you could argue is past its expiration, and the beginning of a new system, one that will be all about transparency, all about, blockchain, and commodities. I mean, this fits right into what Zoltan Pozar says. So again, people who expect instant gratification and immediate results will dismiss this and look past it. And in fact, we've seen that. But to me, it's just more and more and more of the little by little by little by little chipping away. And I would argue this alone, in and of itself, ends the dollar hegemony, not the supremacy. We still represent 60% or more of all of the reserves, and the supremacy is still there. But yeah, you could argue the hegemony is over, and with each passing day, and with each, out of this meeting in Novigrad last week, they talked about 59 countries want to join. How big will this union be? And will all of them start trading on mBridge? And will all of them start accepting and trading the unit? I guess we'll see. There's a special meeting in September to discuss the unit in China. And if it all goes well, they'll roll it out in October. These are all ifs, but you can see that we are hedging and moving and edging in this direction. So I think it's a big deal, Chris, and one that will take time, to your point, but you could argue it's a very long fuse and it's been lit. How long before it hits the firecracker? Don't know, but it's not good for the dollar. It's not good at all for the dollar long term, because you now have legitimate alternatives, if this grows, that have not been around for the better part of over 50 years.
A recovery in jewelry and silverware demand will likely further boost demand. The World Bank said investor interest in silver is set to be bolstered by advanced economy interest rate cuts later this year. The World Bank, in its Commodity Outlook 2024, said silver prices are forecast to increase by 7% in 2024 and a further 4% in 2025. How do India's increasing silver demand and central banks' accumulation influence global silver prices in the coming years? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. If you find this video informative, don't forget to support our channel and turn on notifications to stay informed about our latest videos. See you in the next video.